I'm Jess, and welcome back to another edition of Learn Excel on Mac with Jess. In my last video of the pro tips and tricks of the pivot table, I received a request in making a tutorial on how to combine multiple sheets into one. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to do that with a very powerful tool called the Power Query. Did you know that the typical Excel user spends 80% of their time scrubbing data and manually refreshing things versus doing the actual analysis? With Power Query, you're able to clean large sets of data, combine multiple sheets into one, and it saves you from having a gigantic file that takes forever to load. I do want to note, though, that even though Power Query is widely available on Windows, for us Mac users, it's only available on a different setting on Office 365 called the Current Channel Preview or the Beta Channel. These are settings that are generally meant for professionals and for those who just can't wait to try out Excel features that are yet to be released. The good news is that you can do this too. I will put in the description the step-by-step on how to turn this on, even temporarily, so that you can try out Power Query with me. With that, let's get started. For today's tutorial, you are going to be acting as a manager of a customer service department for a software company. You have 3 reps under you, Marshall, Lisa, and Rami, and all of them have turned in their March timesheets as to which customer had called them, for what issue, and how much time did they spend. You have 2 tasks now in front of you. The first one is to be able to combine all 3 reps' data into one so that you can do your own analysis and compare them. Which rep was the busiest, which issue took the longest or the shortest, which customer had called. The second task for later is to be able to map these customers into an industry and looking at the time spent so you can figure out the time spent per industry. Let's look at that first task. How would you go about combining these 3 reps' data? Well, if you're like me, you may just take Lisa and Rami's table, copy and paste them here, below Marshall's, and make your own pivot table, right? Right. That would work if only you had just a few tabs like I do here, and your data does not need refreshing. With Power Query, you don't have to copy and paste stale data anymore because once it's set up, you can easily refresh it. So let's go get that set up. The first thing we want to do is actually make these tables and name them. So click anywhere on the table, hit Command-T on your keyboard, click OK or hit Enter, and name it. Let's say Table Marshall, and let's do the same for Lisa and Rami. Okay, save. Now, let's go check out that Power Query that we've been talking about. On the Data tab, on the left-hand side, there's a Get Data Power Query button. You want to click on the arrow and click on Launch Power Query Editor. This is your gateway to set things up as well as edit things later down the road. You want to click on Get Data, which is the second button on the Home tab. Click on Excel Workbook because the data that we're trying to import, those 3 tables, are in an Excel workbook. Click on Browse. Choose the file that you are trying to import things from. Hit on Get Data. Next. As you can see here, we have Table Lisa, Table Marshall, and Table Rami that we just named. So let's check mark all 3 of them and click on Create. As you can see here, now Table Marshall, Lisa, and Rami are all imported into the Power Query. So now what you want to do is to be able to combine them. So stay on this Home tab, but on the right-hand side, there's a button called Combine. So let's click on the arrow, click on Append Queries, which is the number 2, and Append Queries as New. So you may be wondering, what is the difference between Merge and Append and an Append Queries versus New? So for what we're trying to do right now, which is to combine similar sheets into one larger data set, one after the other, we're going to use the Append Queries function. Merge function is more similar to a vlookup, xlookup, or index match, which is our task 2 later in combining the customer name and the industry mapping. And Append queries as new just means that when we create this combined data set, we're going to keep it as a separate tab. And at least for me, I prefer to keep it clean that way between the sources of my data and the in-progress larger data sheet that I'm working on. So let's click on that, append queries as new. And because we have 3 tables that we're trying to combine, we're going to choose this radio button, 3 or more tables. It's going to ask us which tables do you want to append. Already has Marshall in here, so we're going to add Lisa, add, and Rami, add, and hit OK. And voila! So now all of those 3 tables have been combined vertically down, which is what we're trying to do. So hit close and load on the top left corner here. And there it is. Now it is a tab in our Excel worksheet. What we can do next is your normal pivot table, which is summarized with the pivot table. Hit OK. And you can do the analysis, which is time spent per minute, and the rep name. I do want to note when we append queries like this, it's easier when you have very similar sheets, as in the column labels are exactly the same in all the tables that you're trying to import. Spoiler alert, in my next tutorial, I actually will show you a different use case when we should name it a bit different so we can make our own custom formulas. But I digress, back to this. You're done. So now, whenever you have more data to add under the Marshall, Lisa, or Rami's, you can just hit refresh on the Power Query, which is going to data, get data, and launch the editor, and hit on refresh button here. We still have one more task to do, which is to create an industry mapping and looking at the time spent per industry. So let's go ahead and close out of this. Click on close and load. So for this exercise, I prepared a mapping of industries. So looking at customers and what industries they sit in. For example, airport is government, bakery is food, etc. And our task is to take this append table that we have and adding a column here for the industry. How would you go about that? For me, before the Power Query days, I would just use a lookup like vlookup, xlookup, or index match, and combining the customer to the industry mapping. That would work again when you have kind of few rows of data. But when you have hundreds of thousands of data, the formula takes a very long time since it's using so much processing power. So with Power Query, once you set that up with the merge function, you're able to set that up instantaneously. So let's do that. Before that, let's go ahead and name our industry mapping table. Hit Command T. OK, and name it table industry. Save. Next, let's go back to our editor, which is data, get data, and launch the editor. We're going to click on get data, and as you're noticing, these are very similar steps to before. Click on Excel workbook, browse the file that we want, get data, and hit next. As you can see here, you have the table industry. Click on the check mark and hit create. Okay, so now this table is in Power Query and we have to combine it with the append query. So click on append and staying on the home tab on the right hand side, click on combine, merge queries this time, and merge queries as new. It's going to ask which is your primary table to merge, and for us this is the append table. And on the right table for merge, click on the drop-down menu and hit table industry. Next, you want to tell Excel which is the column out of these 2 tables is the common identifier. So for us, this is the customer, right? So you would click here on customer for the left table and again on the right table and hit OK. And there it is. Now we have the table that looks like the append, but with an additional column for table industry. It's saying table now because we haven't specified which column do we want to show in the table industry. So with your mouse, left click on this multi-arrow button, unselect all, and choose the industry. And there it is. Now you have a lookup without the actual formula. Let's go ahead and close and load that. And now you can do your normal pivot table, which is summarize with pivot table. Click OK. And let's look at the industry and the time spent. Wow, you just completed a first look at Power Query. There is so much more that we can use this tool for. And in fact, my next tutorial will be using Power Query to calculate a budget versus actual spend variance. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and a subscribe so that others can also find it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.